Pain came first, sharp and cold-like, needles pushing through every muscle. David Reed tried to move his fingers and felt nothing, tried to open his eyes and saw only blur, somewhere in the fog of his mind. He knew this feeling. Cryosleep recovery, the worst part of deep space travel. But something was different this time. Something warm pressed against his left arm, something that breathed in slow, steady rhythm. His vision cleared in patches, white ceiling, medical equipment, the hum of life support systems, standard recovery room on any colony station. But that warmth remained, and now he felt it on his right side too. Two sources of heat, two patterns of breathing that were not his own. David turned his head and his breath caught. Two dragons lay curled against him, small ones barely the size of large dogs. One had scales black as space itself, absorbing the medical bay lights. The other shimmered copper red, like cooling metal fresh from a forge. Both had their eyes closed, their necks stretched across his body as if holding him down or holding him safe. "You are awake," the voice came from somewhere above. David looked up to see a tall bird-like creature standing at the foot of his bed, feathers covered its body in shades of gray and white, and its eyes were large and round. "I am Whistler. I run this station." David tried to speak. His throat was dry, and the words came out rough. "What are these?" "Dragons, specifically redstone dragons. Native to this world." Whistler moved closer, its head tilting in that way birds do. "They have been here for 17 days waiting for you." "Waiting? I don't understand." Whistler pulled up a chair and sat. Though its body was not built for human furniture, "You were supposed to wake 3 months ago. There was a malfunction. Your cryopod, you went into deep sleep. Protocol, we could not wake you safely. So we waited." The creature paused, looking at the dragons. "These two arrived 8 weeks ago, hatchlings, abandoned in the southern valleys. We found them near death." David felt the black dragon shift against him. Its breathing changed, became lighter, waking up. "Our previous human crew member, Robert, cared for abandoned creatures. He found these two, brought them here, nursed them back to health." Whistler's voice grew softer. "Robert died 4 weeks ago. Heart failure, very sudden." The dragons grieved. They stopped eating, stopped responding to anyone. The copper dragon's eyes opened. They were gold, bright and clear. They focused on David's face, and something in that gaze made his chest tighten. "Then they found your pod," Whistler continued. "We do not know how, but they came to the medical bay and would not leave. They lay beside your pod day and night. They started eating again, small amounts, just enough to survive. They were waiting for me, but I never met them. I never met Robert." "No, but you are human, and Robert was human. Perhaps that is enough for them." The black dragon lifted its head. Its eyes were silver like twin moons. It looked at David with the same intensity as its copper brother. Both dragons began to purr, a sound like distant thunder mixed with the rumble of engines. David reached out slowly. His hand shook from the cryosleep weakness, but he managed to touch the black dragon's head. The scales were warm, smooth. Nothing like he expected. The dragon closed its eyes and pressed into his palm. "What are their names?" Robert called them Pitch and Cinder. "The black one is Pitch, the copper is Cinder." As if responding to their names, both dragons moved closer. Cinder climbed onto David's chest, careful with its claws. Pitch remained at his side, its tail wrapping around David's arm. They were heavy, solid, real. "I don't know anything about dragons," David said. "I'm just a colonist. I was coming here to work in the mining survey team." "That may be true," Whistler stood, smoothing its feathers, "but these dragons do not care about your job. They care that you are here, that you are human, that you are alive." David looked down at Cinder. The dragon's eyes were half closed now. Peaceful, its breathing had slowed, again matching the rhythm it had before. David woke like it could finally rest. Now that he was conscious, "What happens if I can't take care of them?" Whistler walked toward the door, then paused. "They have not eaten a full meal. Since Robert died, they have lost weight." The medical staff tried everything. Other humans on the station tried to bond with them. Nothing worked. The bird creature looked back at David. "You have been awake for 5 minutes and they are calmer than they have been in a month. I think you already are taking care of them." The door closed, leaving David alone with the dragons. He laid his head back on the pillow and felt the weight of 2 small lives pressing against him, depending on him, trusting him in a way he did not understand and definitely did not deserve. Pitch made a small chirping sound and nuzzled closer, Cinder's tail wrapped around David's wrist, gentle but firm. David had lost everything once before. His family, his home, everything he loved. He came to this colony to start over, to disappear into work and routine and forget. But here were 2 creatures who had also lost everything, 2 small dragons who decided he was worth waiting for. He raised his hand and stroked Cinder's neck. The dragon's purring grew louder. Maybe forgetting was not what he needed. Maybe what he needed was right here, breathing warm against his skin, refusing to let him face the world alone. "All right," David whispered, "I guess we're doing this together." Both dragons' tails twitched, almost like a response, almost like agreement. The medical bay lights dimmed for station night cycle. David closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he did not sleep alone. 3 days passed before David could walk without assistance. His legs remembered how to work slowly, painfully. Pit and Cinder never left his side. When he fell the first time, they caught him, their small bodies surprisingly strong. When he tried again, they walked pressed against his legs, providing balance. The station medical officer, a 6-limbed creature named Spinner, watched with obvious confusion. "They act like you raised them from eggs," she said, checking David's vital signs. "Dragons normally take months to bond. These 2 bonded with you unconscious." David sat on the exam table while Cinder climbed into his lap. The dragon was heavier than it looked, all muscle under those copper scales. Whistler said they imprinted on Robert. "Yes, but Robert earned that bond. He saved them, fed them, taught them." Spinner made a note on her data pad. "You just existed near them. That should not be enough." But it was enough. David did not understand it either, but every time he looked at the dragons, he saw trust in their eyes, complete, absolute trust. It terrified him. That night, alone in his assigned quarters, David sat on the floor and let himself remember the last time someone trusted him completely. His daughter, Anne, 8 years old, bright smile always reaching for his hand. The colony disaster had come without warning. Hull Breach in the residential sector. Explosive. Decompression. He was off shift in the commercial district by the time he got there. Everyone was gone. His wife, his daughter, 43 other families, all gone in 90 seconds. He became an emergency responder after that, dedicated himself to saving others, to being useful, to never failing again. But the grief followed him everywhere, so he requested transfer to the furthest colony he could find. Redstone 7, edge of known space, a place to disappear. A scratching sound at his door pulled him back to the present. He opened it to find Pitch and Cinder sitting in the hallway. Cinder held something in its mouth, a blanket from the medical bay. "You're supposed to sleep in the habitat Spinner made for you," David said. Pitch chirped and pushed past him into the room. Cinder followed. They went straight to the corner near David's bed and curled up together, still holding the blanket. David sighed. "Fine, but this is temporary." It was not temporary. Every night after that, the dragons appeared at his door. Every morning, they woke him with gentle nudges. They learned his routine faster than he learned theirs. When he ate, they ate. When he rested, they rested. When he worked on his physical therapy exercises, they mimicked his movements, turning it into a game. The other station residents noticed. David heard them talking in the cafeteria, saw them watching as he walked through the corridors with 2 dragons trailing behind him. Most seemed fascinated, a few seemed concerned. "You're getting attached," said a voice behind him one evening. David turned to find a reptilian security officer named Scales watching him. The officer's species had rough green skin and eyes that did not blink. "That's dangerous." David was in the recreation area, throwing a rubber ball for Pitch and Cinder. They chased it together, crashing into walls and each other, making sounds that might have been laughter. "I'm just taking care of them." "No, you're parenting them." Scales moved closer, its voice low. "I've seen humans do this before. You find broken things and try to fix them. But dragons aren't human children. They grow fast. In 6 months they'll be bigger than you. In a year they'll be dangerous." "They're not dangerous." "Not to you maybe, but what about everyone else?" Scales gestured around the station. "What happens when they decide someone is a threat to you? What happens when their protective instincts override their training?" David watched Cinder bring the ball back, dropping it at his feet and looking up expectantly. "Then I'll teach them control." "You think you can teach what their species spent millions of years evolving? You think your human feelings are enough?" "I think," David said carefully, "that these dragons have already lost everyone they cared about. I'm not going to abandon them because they might become inconvenient." Scales stared at him for a long moment. Then it made a sound like grinding rocks. "Laughter maybe." Robert said the same thing. He was wrong too, but at least he had training in xenobiology. "What do you have?" David picked up the ball and threw it. Again, both dragons raced after it, Pitch using its wings to glide over a bench while Cinder scrambled around it. They were playing, learning, growing. "I have experience with loss," David said quietly. "I know what it feels like to have no one. I know what it means when someone chooses to stay." Scales left without another word. David stayed in the rec area until the dragons were exhausted, panting, and happy. He carried them back to his quarters. One under each arm, they were getting heavier, growing, just like Scales said. But growth was not the same as danger. Growth was natural, necessary. David had stopped growing after the disaster. Stopped changing, stopped feeling. Stopped trying, he just went through motions day after day, waiting for nothing in particular. Now he had two small dragons sleeping in his quarters, two lives that needed him to be better than he was, to be present, aware, caring, things he thought he had lost the ability to be. Cinder shifted in sleep, making soft dream sounds. Pitch's tail twitched, chasing something. In dragon dreams, David sat on his bed and watched them. Maybe Scales was right, maybe he was getting too attached, maybe he was trying to fill a hole that could not be filled. But when Pitch opened one silver eye and looked at him, when Cinder's tail reached out to wrap around his ankle, even while sleeping, David knew the truth. He was not trying to fill anything, he was trying to build something new. Something that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with two creatures who decided he was worth their trust. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The station library was quiet, except for the hum of environmental systems. David sat at a terminal, scrolling through xenobiology files on redstone. Dragons. Pitch lay across his feet, warm weight keeping them pinned to the floor. Cinder perched on the desk beside the monitor, watching the screen with curious golden eyes. Dragon development stages, dragon dietary needs, dragon social structures. The files contained facts and figures, scientific observations, and behavioral studies, but none of it felt right. None of it matched what David saw when he looked at Pitch and Cinder. The files said dragons were solitary hunters, but these two refused to be apart. The files said dragons bonded slowly over months of careful interaction, but these two bonded in days. The files said dragons could not learn complex communication, but when David said come, they came. When he said wait, they waited. They understood tone, gesture, emotion. You look frustrated. Whistler appeared at the library entrance, moving with that silent grace birds often had. The information is not helpful. David leaned back in his chair. The information is fine for normal dragons, but Pitch and Cinder aren't normal. No, they are not. Whistler came closer, examining the screen. They have experienced trauma, loss, survival. Against odds, these things change a creature. So what do I do? The files don't cover this. Whistler's head tilted. What would you do with a human child in the same situation? David blinked. I'd give them structure, routine, make them feel safe, let them know they're not alone. Then do that. But they're dragons, not humans. Yes, but pain is pain, loss is loss. Whistler touched Cinder's head gently. With one wing tip, the dragon purred. Robert understood this. He treated them as individuals, not as specimens. Perhaps you should do the same. After Whistler left, David closed the scientific files. He opened a blank document instead and started writing. Not research, a schedule, times for meals, for play, for rest, activities that would challenge them, teach them, help them grow, not based on dragon studies, based on what felt right. The next morning, David introduced the new routine. Breakfast at the same time each day. Then exercise in the station's cargo bay, where there was space to run and fly. Pitch and Cinder took to it immediately. racing each other across the open floor, using their wings to leap higher and higher. Other station members gathered to watch. The spectacle drew a crowd. David noticed Spinner taking notes, her 6 limbs moving in rapid patterns across her data pad. After exercise came training, simple commands at first: come, stay, gentle. David used hand signals along with words, giving them multiple ways to understand. Pitch learned faster with gestures. Cinder responded better to vocal tone. They were different even though they were brothers. Remarkable, Spinner said during one session, they understand context. Watch, she pointed to how Cinder would bring objects to David, but only when David gestured a specific way. That's problem-solving behavior, advanced cognition. They're smart, David said. I don't think anyone gave them credit for that. Robert did, but he was one human, one voice. Spinner made more notes. You're proving his theories correct. Dragons can learn, they can adapt, they simply need the right teacher. The afternoon was for socialization. David brought Pitch and Cinder to different parts of the station, introducing them to other residents. Some species were nervous at first. Dragons were predators after all, but the dragons remained calm, curious, friendly. They learned which species liked to be touched and which preferred distance. A small furry creature named Tuft was terrified initially. It hid behind David, trembling, but Cinder approached, slowly, keeping low, making soft sounds. It took 20 minutes, but eventually Tuft reached out and touched Cinder's nose. The dragon stayed perfectly still. Patient. How did you teach them that, Tuft asked, voice high and squeaky. I didn't, David admitted. They just understood they needed to be gentle. Evenings were quiet time. David would read to them human stories from Earth. He did not know if they understood the words, but they listened to his voice. Sometimes he would talk about his old life, about Anne, about his wife, about the home he lost. The dragons would curl close and listen. One night, 3 weeks into the new routine, something changed. David was telling a story about Anne learning to ride a bicycle, how she fell the first time, scraped her knee, cried, how she got back up and tried again. Pitch made a sound, not a chirp or a purr, a word clumsy, rough but clear. Duh. David stopped mid-sentence. What did you say? Pitch tilted its head. Da-da. Cinder perked up. Duh-ya. They were trying to say his name, trying to talk. David's hands shook. He reached out and touched Pitch's head, then Cinder's. Yes, David, I'm David. David, Cinder said, the syllable strange in its mouth, but recognizable. David, Pitch echoed. Spinner would want to know about this immediately. The scientific implications were enormous. Dragons did not speak. Every study said they could not form human sounds. But David did not call Spinner, not yet. This moment was his, theirs. Good, he whispered, that's very good. Both dragons pressed close, their warmth surrounding him. They smelled like copper and stone, like something old and wild, but their eyes held something new. Understanding, connection. The files said dragons could not bond deeply with other species. Said they could not learn language, said they were beautiful but simple creatures. The files were wrong. David wrapped his arms around both dragons, and they wrapped around him. Return, tails and wings creating a small shelter in the middle of his quarters. David, safe, Cinder said. Safe, Pitch agreed. David closed his eyes and held them tighter for the first time since the disaster, since losing everything. He felt it too. Safe. The alarm ripped through the station. Like a scream, red emergency lights flooded every corridor. David jerked awake, his emergency response training kicking in before his mind fully processed what was happening. Breach alert, hull integrity compromised, all personnel to emergency stations. Pitch and Cinder were already on their feet, scales raised, eyes alert. They had grown over the past 2 months. Pitch now reached David's waist, Cinder slightly larger. Both moved with deadly grace that still surprised him. David grabbed his comm unit. Whistler. What's happening? Static, then Whistler's voice sharp with stress. Pirates 3 ships. They docked by force at the western airlock, armed. Boarding party. They want our mineral samples. The station held 6 months of survey results, rare element deposits worth millions, but the station was a research outpost, not a military base. Security consisted of Scales and 2 other officers against trained pirates. They would not last long. Where are you? David asked, pulling on his boots. Command center. We're trying to seal sections, slow them down. An explosion. In the background, they're cutting through bulkheads. David, get to the evacuation pods. Take the Dragons and go. What about the research staff? The civilians? They were evacuating them now, but the pods only hold so many. You need to leave. David looked at Pitch and Cinder. Both dragons watched him, reading his body language like they always did. How many people still need evacuation? 23, but we don't have time. They'll be here in minutes. David's mind raced. His emergency response training covered evacuation procedures, crowd management, crisis coordination. He had led evacuations before, had saved people before, but that was years ago, before he stopped caring whether he lived or died. Now he had 2 dragons looking at him with absolute trust, 23 people who needed help, a choice. Whistler, can you route me to station-wide comms? What? Why? Do it. A click, then silence. David took a breath. This is David Reed. All civilian personnel, listen carefully. Evacuate through the eastern corridor, not the western. Move in groups of 5. Stay quiet. Help anyone who can't move quickly. Security will guide you to the pods. He pulled up a station map on his wall. Terminal. The pirates were cutting through from the west. If the civilians went east and looped around through the maintenance tunnels, they could reach the pods without being detected. Scales, can you hear me? The security officer's voice came through. Yes. What are you doing, human? Buying you time. Get those people out. I'll handle the distraction. With what? You have no weapons, no training. David looked at Pitch and Cinder again. I have what I need. He cut the comm before Scales could argue. The dragons moved closer, sensing his change in mood, his fear, his determination. We're going to do something dangerous, David said. Both dragons tilted their heads. There are bad people on the station. They want to hurt our friends. We need to stop them. Bad, Cinder said. The dragons' vocabulary had grown to nearly 50 words. Yes, bad, dangerous. Pitch growled low and rumbling. Protect. Protect David, Cinder added. No, protect everyone, but stay with me. Stay close, understand? Both dragons nodded, a gesture they learned from watching humans. David led them through the corridors, toward the western section. His heart hammered. This was insane. He was not a fighter. The dragons were young, untested in real combat, but someone had to slow the pirates down. Someone had to give the civilians time to escape. They reached the junction near the western airlock. David could hear voices, rough, speaking in a language he did not recognize. He peered around the corner. 5 pirates, heavily armored, carrying plasma cutters and rifles. They were forcing open the door to the mineral storage vault. David stepped into the corridor. You're in the wrong section. Minerals are kept in the eastern vault. The pirates turned. One laughed, helpful. Civilian, how nice. The translator made its voice mechanical. Move along before you get hurt. Can't do that. David's voice was steadier than he felt. This is my station, my home. Your home is about to have new management. The lead pirate raised its weapon. Last chance to walk away. Pitch and Cinder stepped out from behind David. They had grown, but next to armored pirates with guns, they looked small, vulnerable. The pirates laughed harder. Pet lizards. This is your defense. David felt the dragons tense beside him. Felt their muscles coil. They're not pets, they're family. The lead pirate aimed at David. Then they can watch you die. Everything happened in 3 seconds. Pitch launched forward, wings spread, moving faster than David had ever seen. The dragon hit the lead pirate's arm, knocking the rifle aside. The shot went wide, burning a hole in the wall. Cinder went for the second pirate, claws finding gaps in the armor, pulling the creature off balance. David grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed it at the third pirate's helmet, blinding it. Pitch used its tail to sweep the legs out from under the 4th pirate. Cinder breathed fire for the first time, a small jet of flame that made the 5th pirate stumble backward in surprise. The dragons were not fighting to kill. They were fighting to disable, to frighten, to create chaos, just like David taught them in their play fighting games. Control, not destruction. Fall back, the lead pirate shouted. Retreat to the ships. They ran, actually ran, 5 armed pirates fleeing from 2 young dragons and 1 unarmed human. David's legs gave out. He sat hard on the floor, adrenaline shaking through him. Pitch and Cinder rushed over, checking him for injuries, making worried sounds. I'm okay, he said. You did good, so good. His comm crackled. David, there. Leaving, the pirates are retreating. Whistler sounded amazed. All civilians are in the pods. Everyone is safe. What did you do? David wrapped his arms around both dragons. They wrapped around him in return, purring with relief and pride. We protected our family, he said. The repair crews worked for 2 days. Straight, sealed bulkheads, fixed cut walls, replaced damaged systems. Station had survived, but barely. David helped where he could, though his expertise was in emergency response, not engineering. Mostly he stayed out of the way and kept Pitch and Cinder calm. The dragons were different after the fight, more alert, more protective. They watched doorways, listened to footsteps, positioned themselves between David and any stranger who approached. It worried him. He did not want them living in fear, but he did not know how to explain that the danger had passed. On the 3rd day, a new ship docked. Unmarked, elegant, Whistler met the visitor at the airlock and brought them straight to David's quarters. The visitor was unlike any species David had seen, crystalline, geometric, like a living sculpture of light and angles. It moved without walking, simply gliding across the floor. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. I am Prism, Galactic Council. Investigator. The being shifted colors from clear to pale blue. I am here to understand what happened. David stood, gesturing for the being to enter. Pitch and Cinder growled softly. It's all right, David told them. This is a guest. Prism examined the dragons with what might have been curiosity, hard to tell. With a crystalline being, fascinating. The reports did not mention their size. They have grown. They grow fast. What reports? The pirate incident has attracted attention. This is the 4th time this year that a human-operated station has successfully repelled hostile boarding. Prism settled into a shape like a chair. Though it did not need one, the council wants to know why. Whistler entered behind Prism, looking nervous. I told them about your coordination, your evacuation procedures. I just did what anyone would do, David said. No. Prism's color shifted to amber. Interviews with the crew reveal something more. You organized 23 different species during a crisis. You kept them calm. You made them work together. This is not normal. David sat down and the dragons immediately flanked him. I used to be an emergency responder. I know evacuation protocols. Protocols are not what saved this station. Prism extended something like a hand, and a holographic display appeared. Images of other stations, other incidents. Station Gamma 9, human administrator named Helen. Pirates attacked. She coordinated 3 different species to defend the station using maintenance equipment. No casualties. Another image. Station Outpost 47, human named Peter. Hostile alien fauna breach. He organized the residents into protection groups based on their natural abilities. Everyone survived. More images, more stories, all involving humans, all involving successful defense or evacuation under impossible circumstances. The pattern is clear, Prism said. Humans have a unique ability to create cohesion among diverse species during crisis situations. You see individuals, not categories. You adapt your approach to each person's needs. That's just basic respect, David said. Basic to you, perhaps. Revolutionary to the galaxy. Prism's colors rippled like water. Most species interact well with their own kind. Some can work with 1 or 2 other species, but humans can work with anyone. You find common ground where others see only difference. Spinner entered the room, having been listening at the door. It's not just crisis situations. Watch how David trains the dragons. He treats them as individuals. Pitch learns differently than Cinder. David adapted his teaching for each one. Yes. Prism turned to the dragons. These 2 should not be able to speak. Dragon vocal anatomy cannot form human words, yet they do because they're human. Taught them it was possible and they believed him. Cinder looked at Prism. David teaches. We learn. See? Spinner's multiple limbs gestured excitedly. That sentence structure. That understanding of cause and effect. No dragon has ever demonstrated this level of cognition. Because no one asked them to, David said quietly. Everyone assumed they couldn't, so they never tried. Prism shifted to deep purple. Precisely, and this is why I am here. The Galactic Council wants to establish integration training facilities, places where different species can learn to work together. We want humans to lead these programs. David blinked. What? You would teach other species what you did here, how to see beyond surface differences, how to build teams from diverse individuals, how to create bonds that transcend biology. I'm not a teacher, I'm just a guy who woke up with 2 dragons and tried to take care of them. That humility is exactly why you are qualified, Whistler spoke up, moving closer. You don't think you're special, you just do what feels right. That's what we need. David looked at Pitch and Cinder. They looked back with those trusting eyes. I don't know if I can do this. I'm still figuring things out myself. You lost your family, Prism said gently. Your species file includes that information. You came here to hide from pain. David's chest tightened. Yes. But you did not hide. You found 2 orphans and built a new family. You saved 23 lives during an attack. You united this station in ways Whistler has tried for years to accomplish. Prism's colors became warm gold. You turned your pain into purpose. That is the human gift. Pitch leaned against David's leg. David said, "No, I'm okay." He touched the dragon's head. "Just thinking." "Think hard?" Cinder asked. "Very hard." Both dragons pressed closer, their way of offering comfort, their way of saying they were there no matter what he decided. Prism stood, or rather shifted to standing height. "You do not need to answer now. Consider it, discuss it with your family." The being gestured to the dragons. "They are family, yes." David wrapped his arms around Pitch and Cinder. "Yes, they are." "Then ask them, they seem wise." After Prism left, David sat with the dragons for a long time. "What do you think?" he asked them. "Should we help others learn what we learned?" Pitch tilted its head. "Help others. Teach them like I taught you." Cinder's tail twitched thoughtfully. "Others alone like we were alone." "Some of them, yes." "Then help," Pitch said firmly. "Everyone should have family." David smiled. Trust 2 young dragons to cut through his doubts with simple truth. Everyone should have family, even broken people like him. 4 months later, the station looked completely different. New wings had been added, expanded habitat areas, training facilities, observation rooms. What was once a simple mining research outpost had become something unprecedented in galactic history. The integration training facility, the first of its kind. David stood at the observation window, overlooking the main training area. Below, 15 different species worked together on a coordination exercise. Small furry creature from an ice world, paired with a methane-breathing giant from a gas planet. A bird-like species, similar to Whistler, worked with an aquat being in a mobile water suit. Unlikely partnerships, finding ways to communicate despite every difference. Pitch and Cinder helped with the training. Now they had grown large, nearly the size of horses. Their scales had deepened in color. Pitch's black absorbed light completely. Cinder's copper gleamed like molten metal. But despite their size and strength, they remained gentle with the trainees. David watched Cinder work with a nervous insectoid whose species had been prey to dragons for millennia. The dragon lay flat on the ground, making itself smaller, less threatening, letting the insectoid approach at its own pace. teaching through patience what words could not convey. It still amazes me, Whistler said, joining David at the window every time. I see it. How did you know this would work? I didn't. I just knew that fear comes from not understanding. Once you understand someone, really understand them, fear becomes respect. Below the insectoid touched cinders. Nose, the dragon purred and the insectoid's antennae quivered with what looked like joy. You have 43 trainees now, Whistler continued, 3 more ships arriving next week with 15 more. The council is requesting you establish 5 more facilities across the galaxy. David shook his head. I can barely manage this one. I'm not qualified to run an entire network. You keep saying that, and yet here you are doing exactly what you claim you cannot do. A young alien approached one of the trainees. It had 6 legs and fur like silver wire. David, can you help? I don't understand how to work with the rock beings. They communicate through vibrations and I cannot feel them. David knelt to the alien's level. What can you feel? Warmth, air movement, touch. Then start there. Touch the ground. Them feel how they move. Air displacement can tell you a lot. David paused. Also ask Pitch to help. Pitch is very good at sensing ground vibrations. The alien's eyes brightened. Thank you. It hurried off toward the training floor. Whistler made that grinding rock laugh. You just taught that being to use a dragon as a translation device. Casual brilliance. It's just problem solving. No, it's seeing possibilities where others see obstacles. David watched as Pitch joined the silver-furred alien, demonstrating how to interpret ground vibrations. The rock beings responded, their movements becoming smoother, more coordinated with the aliens' attempts at communication. Spinner appeared from the medical wing, her data pad showing streams of data. David, you need to see this. Cognitive development measurements from our resident species. She pulled up graphs. Every species here is showing improved problem solving skills, better communication abilities, higher social cohesion markers. Even the ones who have only been here 2 weeks. Is that unusual? Unusual, it's revolutionary. Spinner's limbs gestured excitedly. These beings aren't changing physiologically, they're changing mentally, learning to think in new ways, and it's spreading. When they return home, they teach others. Whistler nodded. We've received reports, former trainees establishing their own integration programs on their home worlds using your methods. David felt something shift in his chest. Not the old pain, something new. Something that felt like hope. An alarm chimed, not an emergency. The arrival alert, new trainees. David headed to the docking bay with Pitch and Cinder following. The dragons knew the routine now. New arrivals were always nervous. Seeing humans and dragons working together helped ease their fears. The ship docked, the airlock opened. 3 beings emerged. One looked like animated water contained in a mobile suit. Another resembled a small mountain, all gray stone and slow movement. The third was hard to describe, something like living shadow with glowing eyes. All 3 stopped when they saw Pitch and Cinder. They're safe, David said, stepping forward. This is Pitch and Cinder. They're part of our teaching staff. The water being's translator crackled. Dragons, we came here to learn from humans, and you have dragons. Yes, they learned from me. Now they teach others. Impossible. Dragons are predators. They cannot be teachers. Cinder walked forward slowly. Not impossible, just different. The dragon's speech had improved dramatically. We teach patience, understanding, protection. The three new arrivals stared in silence. You speak, the shadow being whispered. Dragons do not speak. They didn't, David said, until someone believed they could. That's what we do. Here, we believe in possibilities. Pitch moved to stand beside Cinder. You are scared, we understand scared. We were alone once, not alone anymore. You won't be alone either. The stone being, who had not spoken yet, made a sound like grinding consonants. This place, what is it really? David smiled. It's a place where lost things find purpose, where different becomes family, where we learn that what separates us is nothing compared to what we can build together. He looked at Pitch and Cinder, at Whistler, at Spinner, at all 43 trainees working in the training area, at the staff members from 12 different species who now called this station home. It's a place where we stop being alone. The water being moved closer. Can you teach us this? Can you teach us to be like you? I can't make you like anyone else, but I can help you become better versions of yourselves. David gestured toward the facility. We all can, that's the point. We learn from each other. As the new trainees entered the facility, David felt Cinder's tail wrap around his wrist. Pitch pressed against his other side, their way of saying they were proud, their way of saying they understood. He had come to this station to disappear, to hide from pain and loss. Instead, he found two orphan dragons who refused to let him fade away, who showed him that broken things could heal, that family was not always blood, that purpose could grow from the deepest grief. A message arrived on his comm from Prism. The council was approving 5 more facilities. They wanted David to train the humans who would lead them. David looked at the training floor, at all the unlikely friendships forming, at all the barriers being broken down one conversation at a time. He opened the comm. Tell the council. Yes, we'll do it, but we're doing it our way, the way that honors every individual, the way that builds bridges instead of walls. Pitch and Cinder purred in unison. The way that turns pain into family, loss into purpose, ending into beginning. The way forward together.